Before I start, I just want to mention a couple things. First, if you have any questions, I believe there's a question and answer period at the end. So just you can save your questions till then. All of the photos that you see in the presentation are my photos because I also do photography. And I've divided the presentation to three parts. So part one is basically, what is a butterfly? Okay, so here we go. So butterflies and moths, they belong to the order Lepidoptera. And just like insects, butterflies are comprised of three parts. So they have their head, the thorax, and the abdomen. And of course, they have their 6 legs. And they do have 4 main wings. And a common question that people often ask is, how do you tell a butterfly apart from a moth? Well, all butterflies have clubbed antennae, which you'll see in just a moment. The scales and patterns you see on the wings are actually scales that when light is refracts across them, you see different colors and patterns. Butterflies, they feed with what's called a proboscis. That's what they use to suck up the nectar that they are in search of when they go from flower to flower. In Ontario, there's, I believe, 167 recorded species so far that we can enjoy, although some of them are migrant species or have just been seen as vagrants just passing through. So where do butterflies live? So as you know, butterflies are terrestrial. You see them mainly on land in many different habitats. So for instance, a desert or a meadow or a grassland, maybe in montane areas, wetlands. You can find butterflies in forests. And even places up north near the tundra areas or even the Arctic Circle. Many butterfly species, of course, need specific host plants for the caterpillars to feed on. So for example, they may feed on trees in an oak savanna or trees in an old growth forest, maybe flowers in a sand dune or the many wildflowers you find in a meadow. But generally speaking, you could find butterflies in various green spaces, even in heavily populated urban areas, even perhaps in your backyard. But oddly enough, the greatest diversity of butterflies live in the tropics. So if you are an avid butterflyer, this is where you need to go. Ontario is not the place if you want to find a diversity of butterflies. Butterflies versus moths. So in Ontario, there's a vast number of more species of moths than are butterflies. Myself, I've seen well over 600, approaching 700 species of moths. But as I mentioned earlier, basically the easiest way is to look at the antennae. Butterflies exclusively have clubbed antennae, whereas moths can have a few different setups for their antennae. Overall, most butterflies have that same sort of shape. They lay their wings flat, and their shape is mainly the same, as some butterflies have tails. But moths can come in a huge array of sizes and shapes and colors and appearances. Generally speaking, butterflies are more colorful. Moths can tend to be more gray or brown, but there's plenty of exceptions because there are some moths that are fantastic. They almost look like butterflies. And then there's some butterflies that actually look very dull too. So some of the skippers, they're just orangey brown and don't have too much patterns on them. Butterflies are mostly diurnal. That means that you'll see them during the day. They feed during the day. They flit from flower to flower. Most moths, you have to set up a light trap to see them, or they'll be attracted to lights. So they're nocturnal. There are some exceptions. You can flesh out some moths, and some moths, some of the clear wing moths, you can see during the day. But generally speaking, butterflies you see during the day, and moths you would see at night. Butterflies, they pupate in a hard chrysalis. Most moths spin a cocoon, or some of the moths can pupate from leaves, rolled up leaves. Okay, so here is just an example of what I was mentioning about the antennae. So there's the clubs, whereas moths, they can have an array of different antennae set up. So like a comb or just a single strand, a little bit of a clubby, or sometimes a curved kind of antenna like this. So what is the life cycle of a butterfly? Well, the eggs are hatched on the underneath the leaf, or on a stem. And then the caterpillars emerge. Their sole task is to bulk up and feed. So they will, depending on the host plant, they will consume the leaves or the seed pods or even the flowers. And then they will go into the chrysalis stage, and then they will emerge as an adult butterfly. So it's a fascinating process. Very similar to how moths emerge as well. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to feature a few butterflies. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them because there are quite a few, but I will feature just a few. So the first one is the Arctic skipper. The Arctic skipper belongs to, of course, the skipper family, or grass skipper family. The Arctic skipper is what I mentioned, that some of the skippers are kind of orangey or dull. Well, this one actually is a little bit more colorful. So you can see on both the underside has a nice vivid pattern. And then on the top side, you can see also a pattern. Oddly enough, it's called the Arctic skipper, but you can find them in Southern Ontario. In fact, I found this one in Rouge National Park, Urban National Park, and the other one I found in the Cardinal, which is a little bit east of Toronto. Generally speaking, you find them in grasslands where they feed on different grasses, and they like to be in open areas. You can often see them just on the edges of trails, or on the edges of ditches and things. The second featured butterfly is one of my favorite. It's the Baltimore Checkerspot. Forgive me, my Latin is not so great, but these are in the family of Nymphalidae, I believe. This particular checkerspot I located and fairly regularly see in, again, Rouge National Urban Park. They tend to be close to wet meadows or under bridges or ditches. The first instar, or the first stage of the caterpillar, they feed on turtlehead. And then successfully afterwards, they can move to other plants like plantains, or trees in the ash family. This is the caterpillar of the Baltimore Checkerspot, very beautiful, very spiky. This was found in a dense thicket as well in Rouge National Urban Park. Okay. So now I'm going to move to part 2. Set up here, 1 second. All right. There we go. I'm in the way here. Can't find my presenter. There it is. Okay. Perfect. So why are butterflies important? Well, first of all, butterflies, they play actually a very important role in the various ecosystems that you find in Ontario, like the Oak Ridge Moraine. Um, as opposed to moths, there are some quite invasive moths and other insect species like beetles. But most butterflies, they do not pose any significant threat. I believe there's only two introduced butterfly species I know of, which is the European skipper, which I'll talk to you about later, and also the cabbage white. But other than those two, butterflies, most native butterflies do not pose any particular threat to the agriculture or commercial plants. So everyone knows bees are significant pollinators. Butterflies are also pollinators, not as important as bees, but they do actually transfer pollen from plant to plant. When they feed, especially when they're putting in their proboscis in search of nectar, they can carry some of the pollen with them when they go to other plants, particularly the plants in the milkweed family. The Monarch depends on the milkweeds, depend on monarchs to pollinate. Some interesting fun facts is that butterflies actually taste with their feet. So that's why you'll see them sort of, climbing over plants, flowers, in search for that sweet nectar. And bees do not see the color red. So the butterflies actually can. And so you'll often see butterflies like another one of my favorites, the giant swallowtail, feeding at plants like cardinal flower or other bright red plants. So here is a common wood nymph you can see feeding on black-eyed Susan. All right. Butterflies are an important part of the food chain. Basically speaking, there are many different animals that depend on butterflies, both at the larval stage as caterpillars and as adult butterflies. I went down to an event called Mothpalooza in the United States, and I learned, and pardon me, I don't remember the speaker offhand, but one of the speakers had mentioned that one tree can actually produce enough caterpillars to sustain several nests. This may include both butterfly and moth caterpillars. So if you can imagine a nest of birds, they would be in search of as many caterpillars as possible to feed to their young. As adult butterflies, birds in the flycatcher family, great crested flycatcher was one of them. You often see them feeding on adult butterflies. If you look carefully at plants like this oxeye daisy, you may see golden crab spiders, grabbing a quick snack like this northern crescent. Snakes, bats, toads. If a butterfly came across in front of a toad will snack on a butterfly, and even snakes. Caterpillars, when they feed, they actually can help to control the host plants from overpopulation. So they eat enough leaves and seed pods so that they can control their growth. And so caterpillars are just as important as the adult butterflies. There is one caterpillar in North America, belongs to this butterfly here, the harvester. It's the only carnivorous butterfly in North America. In its larval stage, the caterpillars, they will actually feed on aphids. And so they can also, they act as a natural pest control. So this particular harvester I found in the Cardinal in a ditch, and it was attracted to the salts in my skin. Um, Quite a beautiful butterfly. You can see a nice vivid pattern underneath. Okay. All right, so butterfly diversity. So if there's a great diversity of butterflies, it could be an indicator that the ecosystem is doing very well, and that there is enough host plants for the butterflies to thrive. But there are a number of challenges that butterflies can face. They are quite sensitive to climate change and any changes in their environment, to be honest. So for instance, with climate change, some butterfly species have been known to start to expand their range. So any changes in temperature, we may see some southern butterflies starting to move north. And a decline of native butterflies or an introduction of new species will complicate the delicate balance of the food chain here in Ontario or other places. Butterflies are also very susceptible to habitat loss. So in urban areas with development and building of infrastructure, some of their habitat can become fragmented. And butterflies, they can't just stay in one small area. They need to have roam and be free to find, and to live, find their, suitable food sources. They're also very susceptible to pesticides, insecticides that are used. They're also monoculture. So for instance, a golf course is not a great place for butterfly diversity. And in addition to that, any introduction of non-native flora that are not host plant or hosts to the caterpillar or the butterfly are also a cause for concern. But scientists are studying population data, and they use that as a kind of a barometer to see if there's any effects of climate change, and they're studying their behaviors and their migration patterns to sort of see what these impacts are of these environmental issues. There are a number of butterfly species in decline. Myself, as a photographer, I have noticed that the diversity of butterflies I used to see has been declining, especially in places like Rouge National Park. I used to see a lot more butterflies, whereas now it's becoming increasingly hard to find the ones I used to see. And some of them are actually now under protection of the Endangered Species Act of 2007, I believe. These include the mottled dusky wing, the Cardinal blue, which I believe used to be seen across Southern Ontario, the frosted elfin, and of course, the monarch. So our fourth featured butterfly is an introduced species, the European skipper. The European skipper has been in Southern Ontario for quite some time. It was introduced in 1910 on a shipment of Timothy grass. In some places, you can actually see more European skippers than any other skipper. And they tend to like open areas where there is Timothy grass or other grasses. They are quite plain and dull and small, but in their own right, they're just as beautiful. But again, with only the cabbage white, that's the only sort of butterflies I know that have been introduced into Ontario. Okay. Well, like myself, there are many people who enjoy watching butterflies, and I'm trying to find species and photograph. Um, there's I can't speak for everyone, but there's a sense of delight and enjoyment seeing these beautiful creatures, and making a list of the butterflies that we see. Even in places like Toronto or urban areas. You don't have to necessarily go too far to see beautiful butterflies. You can see swallowtails, and you can see fritillaries just in some local neighborhood parks and other areas. Even birders, and I know many birders who have started to gain an interest in seeing, recording and seeing butterflies, and photographers. Even places like Point Pelee, there's a huge, every year with the migration of monarchs, people flock to see the great numbers of monarchs that are migrating through. Gardens are also a great way to promote diversity, especially if you understand and know your butterfly species host plants for both the caterpillar and the adult butterflies. So planting native plants is a great way to promote and encourage butterfly species to stay around and stick around. So here is a picture of a black swallowtail that I saw at Toronto Botanical Gardens. And when I do get up north, Algonquin Park is another great place. You can see fritillaries like this Atlantis fritillary. Great. Oh, here we go. All right, so the third part is for those of you who are wondering, well, where can I go to see butterflies? The Oak Ridge Moraine has some great habitats that you can go and see butterflies, but here's just a few of the hotspots in Ontario that you can go to see butterflies. But literally you can see butterflies almost anywhere. But if you're in the right habitats, that can increase your chances of seeing as many species as you can. So I mentioned Rouge National Urban Park. This is a very special park because it is one of the only parks in Canada that lies within a large urban area. It has suitable habitat like forests, meadows, grasslands, agricultural fields, where food sources for all different array of butterflies can feed. The only issue that is challenging is that there is a lot of infrastructure that passes through the park, and there are a lot of people that visit the park. So this is a challenge to keep the park as pristine as possible. But there are places where you can go where you can see many different species. So some of the hiking trails like Cedar Trail or Orchard Trail, you can see grass skippers, you can see some swallowtails, sulfurs like the orange sulfur, the cabbage white, and of course the monarch. And if you go early enough in the spring, you can occasionally see a mourning cloak basking, or maybe a tortoiseshell. There's actually close to 70 species of butterflies that have been found within Rouge National Urban Park. And 27 of those are of special concern or at risk. So this is an older photo of a hickory hair streak that I found just north of the zoo. in a place, a restoration area called the Lower Reserve Restoration Pond. And you can actually see that there's an egg mass there that the butterfly is just sort of hovering over. And believe it or not, I have not seen the hickory hareswig since. This was, I believe, 2011. Okay. So the monarch often gets mixed up or is somewhat challenging to distinguish from the viceroy. So here are a couple pictures of the monarch and the viceroy. So first of all, they share the same sort of habitat. They love meadows, wet meadows, grassy areas. The monarch is actually slightly bigger, but that's difficult to discern if you see them on the wing. So you may not be able to tell, well, was that small or was that big? So a few things that you can make note of. First of all, the monarch tends to fly a little bit weaker and like flutters around. So, from one flower to the next. Whereas the viceroy, I often see the viceroy just flying fairly fast and in almost like a direct kind of line. So they're stronger flyers. And the biggest way that you can tell the difference between the viceroy and the monarch is that the viceroy has this line that goes across the hindwing, whereas the monarch does not. Okay. Another thing too is the monarch has a complete double row of these dots on the ends of their wings, whereas the viceroy only has a spot at the top here that has those. All right, and both of these I saw in Rouge National Urban Park. This one was at Twin Rivers in the Celebration Forest, and this one was not too far away on the Vista Trail. So one of my favorite places to go for both butterflies and birds is the Cardinal Provincial Park. Actually, it's a recently named provincial park in the Kawartha Lakes region. So an alvar is a special type of grassland. It's home to a lot of unique flora and fauna. What makes it very unique is that the soil is very thin because of the exposed limestone. This is just south of the Canadian Shield, where there's lots of exposed rock. So because of this thin soil, the vegetation is quite sparse, and you'll often find some of the vegetation to be stunted and small. And in those areas, you'll find a lot of unique plants like white camas and prairie smoke. You find those scattered throughout the garden. Some of the butterflies that you can find there are silvery blues, mud puddling on the roads. Here's a picture of a mustard white. You can actually find most of the fritillary species like this Aphrodite fritillary. A few of the places that are good for butterflies and other insects, Cameron Ranch is a great place, especially if you go back towards where the wet meadow is. Prairie Smoke Reserve is another place that is very interesting. It's just close south of Lake Dalrymple. And of course, there is Wiley Road. There's a trail called Sedgren Trail. And this is where I found these two butterflies. And you can see other things like some dragonflies and of course, birds. Oh, and just to mention one more thing, last year when I was at Sedge Trail, you can hear, of course, the sedge wrens, but I also heard the click clack of the yellow rail. I didn't see it, but I did hear the sound of the yellow rail, which is found in that area. So Point Pelee National Park, I know it is far away. It's a good 4 hours away, but it is one of the top 5 places in North America to see bird migration and other migration, particularly the monarch butterfly. So every year people go down in the spring, in May, and in the fall, in October, to see the migration, thousands of monarchs that are passing through. It is the most southerly point in Canada. It's in fact at the same latitude as northern California. It has basically 5 main habitats. It has the beach, it has 2 types of forests, it has a marsh, and it has the sand spit. And so these are great places for an abundance of different flora and fauna, including butterfly species. The island that is part of Point Pelee, the Mill Island, is also home to some unique species like the blue racer snake. So here's a picture of some Dutchman breeches. You can also find these in the Greater Toronto area as well. But you can find a Virginia Spring Beauty, and here is a picture of a red admiral on some purple cress. So just a few other places that are good. I mean, any provincial park, actually, in fact, in Ontario is good. But Algonquin Provincial Park, which I mentioned, Pinery Provincial Park on close to Point Pelee. There's also Rondo Provincial Park, which is 3 hours away, a bit east of Point Pelee, Ojibwe Prairie Complex. In the Hamilton region, Fletcher Creek Ecological Preserve it's a place where there's a fen and a bog. It's a great place to find some rare plant species and of course butterflies. High Park is a great place to see the giant swallowtail. And of course, the Oak Ridge Moraine. There are many places in the Oak Ridge Moraine that host great places to find butterflies, dragonflies, and their host plants. So here is an American lady that I found in Murphy's Provincial Park during a BioBlitz. So just a couple or a few online resources I can make available to you. So if you want to learn some of the, like myself, I'm still learning some of the host plants for the many butterfly species. This is a great site that you can use. And if you wanted to see what butterflies are at risk in Ontario, there are a few you can, this is a great website. Of course, I'm a Toronto Entomologist Association member. So Aunt Insects is their website that you can visit to see any upcoming field trips that they may have. And lastly, I will just point out my own website that I will open in just a moment, where you can see some of the other butterflies that I have photographed, and also the numerous amounts of moths that I have photographed as well. And then lastly, I do use on the odd occasion some print materials. I have a large collection of books. So the book I primarily use the most is the fairly new Butterflies of Ontario book. It's a great publication. Colin Jones is quite knowledgeable about butterflies in Ontario. So the ROM has put out a great book. It's a 2014 edition. It has great photos of the butterflies, caterpillars, range maps, and information that you might need if you wanted to know about a specific butterfly. There is also the Caterpillars of Eastern North America by David Wagner, a great book for both butterfly and moth caterpillars. That is a whole new realm. Caterpillars are quite complex, but if you wanted to see what some of the caterpillars look like, both for butterflies and moths, is a great resource. And then another book that is quite good is Butterflies Through Binoculars the East. This is also a great book. It shows some southern species that we may see one day up in Ontario, of butterflies that are found on the east side of North America. All right. And I will just quickly show you so this is my website. So you can see, if you go to my website, you can browse, and I have, not only do I photograph butterflies, but I do photograph pretty much anything, and it's all laid out. So if you wanted to see some more butterfly pictures, I currently have 68 different species that I have photographed, with a few other caterpillars. And then in the same order, I do have a large number of moths that you can see a comparison to what moths look like. And at last count, I believe I have 828 species. Some of them I have actually photographed in other places, but you can go there and you can check and see there's some wonderful pictures of moths that you can find even in Ontario. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if there are any questions that you may have, I'm open to answering them. Okay. Excellent.
Wonderful. There are a couple of questions, Gary, in the chat. The first one is from Elizabeth, and this is a really good question. Based on your experience, what's the best time of day to observe butterflies, and maybe why too, I think would be interesting.
So just in my experience, the earlier the better, although any time of the day is a great time. I've photographed butterflies at dusk. The best days really are sunny days. Butterflies, like other insects, dragonflies, hoverflies, most insects, they tend not to show as much during cloudy days, obviously during rainy days or damp days, but clear, sunny, bright days are the best, and warm too. Warm days are generally the best days that you can see a good diversity of butterflies. Yeah.
And is there a reason for that, or is it?
Well, I mean, for one, they're feeding, so they're not impeded by the rain. They can, they can. I'm not 100% sure, but I think available light, so they can see the flowers. And as with dragonflies, I know that certain temperatures, insects tend to not want to fly. So the cooler it is, they tend to not want to fly or be on the wing as much. So they'll be hunkered down in the grasses. And so a nice sunny, warm day would be ideal.
Okay. And what about wind? Does wind affect anything?
100%. So when it's windy, they tend to not want to be on the wing, so they'll be lower to the ground. It's harder to find. So nice windless days, sunny days are the most ideal days to see butterflies.
Hopefully the type of days we have.
You're right. Right.
Okay, we have another question here from Anonymous. When the butterflies fly toward another butterfly and touch, are they competing/fighting, or just talking, communicating about other stuff?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer, and I've seen that. I've actually seen that. So I'm not sure if you're aware of what mud pulling is. So butterflies will gather together in numbers to extract minerals from the ground. And I often do see the butterflies um, flitting around, almost touching each other. I'm not 100% sure why that is. Um, and that's a great behavior that I'd love to know the answer if anybody knows the answer to that. But I have seen that too. Yeah. So sorry I couldn't answer it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is
More to learn, right? Always with
of course, yeah.
especially insects. It's such a different world, it seems. So we have another one from Claire. This is a really great question.
Mm.
What flowers planted in outdoor pots will attract butterflies?
Well, this is where I'm going to the website I provide for you. Um, if you know the host plant, particularly of both the caterpillar and the adult butterfly, planting it then increases the chances of seeing. But generally speaking, butterflies like colorful flowers. The more colorful, the better. Um, it all just depends on the species. Every species has a particular uh, type of flower or plant that they prefer. So the grass skippers tend to like just the grasses, whereas the bigger butterflies may like some of the more the other wildflowers, like milkweeds. Um, but it just depends on the butterfly species, and this all outlines in the website that I had in the link, and you can see that list there. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
and that's why non-native species
mhm,
are not ideal, because then they can tend to crowd out the native species of wildflowers that many butterflies rely on. So, for instance, in some of the parks here, dog-strung vine is not the host plant for native butterflies, and you see dog-string vine in many places. So that then crowds out the native wildflowers that the butterflies need. Yeah, so it's very important to try to uh, stop the spread of invasive species. Garlic mustard. Although I think garlic mustard, there is, if I remember correctly, one of the butterflies does actually feed on garlic mustard.
a couple more here. Excuse me. From Devra, another really good one.
Mm.
I think there was a documentary about this I saw recently. Where do butterflies sleep or rest? It's a great question.
Oh my gosh, you have me stumped. Um, uh, that is, I know that dragonflies roost on, they hang from tree limbs, simply because it's too cold for them to fly. So they wait till the next morning or next day to then be off on their merry way to fly. But butterflies, maybe I'm assuming it's the same thing, but they can't hang from limbs, so maybe they just find a spot somewhere, which maybe might make them susceptible to prey. So if they're down low, and this would be a great opportunity for a snake or a toad to grab them. So, but where do they sleep? That's a great question. We'll have to find a sleeping butterfly and ask it. Another thing I should need to look up and find out the answer. Thanks for the question.
Always learning.
Mhm.
Liliana asks, would butterflies feed on hummingbirds' nectar feeders?
Well, I do know that hummingbird nectar feeders have the sugar content, but I'm not 100% sure if they're able to get their proboscis up into the tube. So my answer would be I'm not sure, um, but some hummingbird feeders are shaped in the shaped to look like flowers. So I guess there may be a chance that they could feed from hummingbird feeder. Um, but that is a great question. I've never seen a butterfly at a hummingbird feeder. I've always only seen them at flowers. These are all great questions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's got me thinking about spring planting.
Right.
James McMullen asks, is there a butterfly that is as voracious and problematic as the gypsy moth?
So yes, the gypsy moth is quite voracious. Um, as far as I know, even the cabbage whites, uh, I don't know if that's the introduced butterfly species are not significant to you know the degradation of plants. Um, so my answer to that would be probably not. The European skipper has been around for a long time. You can see them in the hundreds, tens in areas where there's a lot of timothy grass or grasses, but then you'll also see other grass skippers too. So um, I'm not sure on that question.
Okay. Julie Pomeroy made a really great point. I think it was
Mhm.
just to us, but iNaturalist being a great application that you can get on your phone to help identify butterflies and generate data. I know, Gary, you're quite active. I always see you posting there. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so iNaturalist is great for a couple reasons. One is it's a great learning tool. So the community on there, everyone, most people on iNaturalist love to share their knowledge and both in identifying and if, like myself, if I have any questions, and so we share knowledge. But it's also a great way to look to see data. So you can see where people are seeing specific species. Um, although sometimes some iNaturalists obscure or hide or make private, but you can certainly um, send a message to them and they may divulge information about where they saw the particular, and that goes with the Oak Ridge Moraine too. Um, the location of where we've seen certain species is obscured, but it's a great way to sort of just see, okay, what are we seeing in Ontario, in Southern Ontario? What species of butterflies are there? Um, and then there's links to, other informations like the plants, the host plants that they, need. Um, and it's a great way to meet other like-minded naturalists too, that share an interest in butterflies, insects, birds, whatever you're sort of into. And for those people who like to list the things that they see, it's also a great way to keep track of um, the number of species you've seen, time of year when you've seen them. So um, it's just a great tool overall for naturalists to use. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it's a really great community.
Mhm.
Everyone's really in tune with one another, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like social media for naturalists.
Right, exactly. Maybe I should post some of those questions on there and see if there are some lepidopterists who may know the answers to these, and we can relay them back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great. Generate some discussion there.
Mhm.
Another one from Elizabeth. Also a interesting question. Do butterflies have a sense of hearing?
Well, I know this in with moths. Um, there are some species of moths that do not have cannot hear. Actually, there's some species of moths that don't have a digestive system. Now, are there butterflies that can't hear? I'm not 100% on that. I do know that with their feet, they're able to determine that the plant they're on, like you'll often see butterflies going from one plant next, and they'll spend a few seconds at one because they know that that's the plant they're looking for. Whereas if they're flitting off to another one, they'll spend a few seconds and they'll know right away that that's not the plant they're looking for. But in terms of hearing, I'm not sure how that works with butterflies. So
apparently some of them have a way to hear with their wings.
With their wings.
Mainly nocturnal, so they can avoid nocturnal predators. I'm just Googling this in the background.
Got it. Oh, and I do see someone type how to moths. Okay, so that's a great question. And I know the answer to that one. So there are certain moths in the prominent family. Their sole existence as adult moths is just to breed. So when they emerge as adult moths, they don't need to eat. They do all their eating as caterpillars. So they actually don't have mouth parts. They just they come out as adult moths. They find a mate. They live a short life, and then that's it. So they don't have no need to feed. Yeah, but not all moths. This is just in that particular family.
I had a quick question actually to follow up with that. How long do butterflies typically live once they've emerged? Is there sort of a set window?
Yeah, so generally speaking, a few weeks for many of them. Some off the top of my head, I can't remember which species specifically, but some of them do last throughout the summer. And you will see the ones that do live longer, you'll see by the end of their life, they're tattered and torn, and because of the elements, because of being on the wing, because of maybe predation upon them, they look like they've gone through like a tornado. And of course their scales wear off. So at the end of their life, as adult butterflies, they often look quite tattered. But some of the smaller ones, a few weeks in July, end of June or July, and they expire if they make it without being eaten by predated by other animals.
That's why it's so special to see fully emerged butterfly. Yeah. This is an interesting question as well. Gypsy moth is now referred to as LD for short. So I'm wondering what that stands for. And then Nathan asks as well, are there any recent butterflies that have had a name change?
Yes. So the Gypsy moth, okay, so temporarily they named it LD because that's the two initials of their Latin name, like something despair. But the Gypsy moth has a new name, and it is called, off the top of my head, does anybody know? The Gypsy moth has a new name.
Spongy moth is their new name.
What was it, Eileen, again?
Spongy moth. I would have called it spiky moth, but they went with spongy moth.
Spongy moth. Okay, yes. And you know what? I heard it like a few weeks ago. I was like, and I found it very strange. That's what but temporarily they did call it LD moth for the Latin or scientific name that it has. And yes, so spongy moth. There you go. No more gypsy moth. It's called the spongy moth, which is very odd. Great.
Oh, some wonderful discussion. I had a quick question as well. My gears are turning. Do you know typically how many eggs a butterfly would lay? Like what their kind of clutch is?
So they definitely have to produce enough because many of them get predate. I know that many of them get eaten by fish, by other insects. So definitely in the dozens, but I guess it all depends too on the species. Um, one or two, they may not survive. Um, they may get eaten by almost anything that comes across them. So, or they might fall off the leaf, not stay on, or many things that could happen. So so if you look at the picture that of the hickory hair streak they had, that there seems to be at least a dozen or not more of the eggs there. Yeah.
Okay, neat. Devra has some insight about the sleeping of butterflies. So they
Mhm.
said they are not an expert, but have learned that butterflies do not actually sleep. Okay.
Oh,
Um, Butterflies are cold-blooded, so they need the sun's warmth to keep their activity levels up. So that would make sense with
exactly.
what you were saying with, sunny days,
Right.
they're kind of out. So when it is dark or cloudy, they become inactive, close their wings, and rest.
Mhm.
Very interesting. It's kind of like a little mini hibernation on cold days.
Right, right, right. And keeping their wings flat helps. Um, so when they keep their wings open, sorry, up, they can become susceptible to the wind. Um, so keeping it low to the ground can help if it's windy or um, and so when it's raining, on the other hand, then they do is they will put their wings up, but then they're going to hide somewhere where it'll be sheltered from the rain. So I've seen actually butterflies underneath or very low to the ground with their wings up on like damp days when it's just spitting or and they have their wings up so that they don't get it as wet. Yeah, which could in turn possibly like remove some of the scales on their wings.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. I don't think there was any more unless I'm missing some. Let me double check. Oh yes, this one. What is the connection between butterflies and death of a loved one? A little bit of a philosophical question, I guess.
Wow, I I wouldn't know it. The death of a loved one. So um, is that from a poem? Is that from a poem or a story that maybe perhaps I don't know.
It is quite interesting. We associate butterflies with such beauty and grace and
Right, right.
yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard the connection between butterflies and the death of loved ones. The whole um, metamorphosis,
Mm,
more creation, more life giving, but and change, right?
mhm.
But not. I haven't heard that any connection to death. That'd be something interesting to look into.
Mhm. That is an interesting one.
Mhm.
Liliana with one
Ah,
here.
someone
Uh,
said,
Go ahead.
"Aha!" Isn't it? And it looks like in Mexican culture, Mexican. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
What did it say? Sorry, I didn't catch that one.
Um, so in Mexican culture, the belief is that the spirits of humans are reincarnated in butterflies.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Wow,
It's beautiful.
that is very interesting.
So what butterfly would you want to be reincarnated as, Gary?
Well, you know what? That's a good. Now let me. I can answer this one. Let's see. Some of the fritillaries are gorgeous, like the Great Spangled Fritillary. I can understand why it's called great because just the color patterns. But I'd have to go to my favorite butterfly though, which is the Baltimore Checkerspot.
Mm.
there's just something about that butterfly. Um, I'm always drawn to that particular place in the Rouge to try to find and see it again because I can take photos of it as often as I can because it's just very beautiful. So a Baltimore Checkerspot.
Nice. I can see it.
Yeah.
So Liliana asks, this is another good one. If the scales on their wings get damaged, are they able to regenerate?
As far as I know, no, don't quote me on this, but once they're removed, I think that's it. That's why you'll see butterflies towards the l- nearing the end of their lives. They look very tattered. Um, so that would be a good one to just double check the answer on that too. But the scales they fall off for a number of reasons. Just wear and tear, um, being grabbed by spiders or things, or getting caught in webs. Butterflies often get caught in webs and then they try to get out, and in that respect they might lose some scales, um, or even a part of their wing gets torn off. And I've seen actually monarch butterflies that I don't even understand how they're able to fly because their wings look so battered and torn. um, But as far as the scales, I don't know. I'm going to guess that they don't regenerate them, but that would be a good question to look into too. And if you know the story of the monarch, so the monarchs, they start their life in Mexico, and then there's three successive generations of monarchs that make their way towards the north, and each generation of monarch is genetically stronger. And by the time they get up here and then they have to migrate back to Mexico, that final monarch has to be strong enough to fly all the way back to. So you may see some of them is like battered and beaten. Those won't make it back to the breeding grounds in Mexico. So they have to be quite strong flyers to fly all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Marie is posting some really interesting links in the question and answer.
I'm gonna have to get
now.
Yes, this
Yeah,
is
it actually got me thinking because it's all about the genetics of butterflies. So it looks like
right.
the genomes have been sequenced for every US and Canada butterfly.
Yeah.
And it made me have this question about the Viceroy and Monarch look-alike. Is there some sort of mimicry or evolutionary mimicry going on there, or is it just by chance? Or
So I know that currently, not related to monarchs and viceroys, but I know currently with the swallowtails, if you go to T, there's a in Ontario, uh, there's a new swallowtail that's actually has been determined. Um, and currently, like if you take photographs of swallowtails in Ontario, there's a great debate on which swallowtail this is, whether it's the eastern or the Canadian tiger swallowtail. And so there's a third one now that Aileen, do you know the name? I think is it summertime swallowtail. But I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that there when we continually study butterflies, moths, and we're continually going to find there'll be subtle differences between species, and they may get broken down into subspecies and other species. Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
It's not as cut and dry.
No, it's not exactly. Moths that I've had identified have since I'd had to change because more studies have been done, and then now there's great debate on, okay, is that really that species? And so, yeah, it's very interesting.
Mhm. And Marie followed up there saying, many use mimicry to avoid predators. That would make sense. And evolution helped them achieve it. Yes.
Exactly.
Neat. Okay. I think that was everything. If anyone has any kind of last lingering questions, feel free to post them.
If anybody is interested in the photograph techniques that I've taken, feel free. But generally speaking, I use for the smaller butterflies, I do use a macro lens to a certain degree. And then I try to use as much available light as possible. I very rarely use flash, other than maybe Phil. Interestingly, I do moths with my moth light, and a few times I've actually seen butterflies on my sheet at night, which was quite interesting to see a butterfly. So I've seen a red admiral on my sheet at night. What
That
else?
is strange.
I got a few times. I've actually seen butterflies come to my moth sheet. Very interesting.
Oh, Jeff,
There it
you
is.
just
Yeah.
put Midsummer Tiger
Right.
Swallowtail. What
I
a
knew
name.
I knew it was summer. I knew it was something summer, mid. Oh, and I think it had to do with the flight period. So so now there's 3 species. The Eastern tiger swallowtail, the Canadian tiger swallowtail, and then now the new one, midsummer. And one of them comes out a little earlier. I can't remember which one. There's a great article on it in T that you can maybe, if I find it, I can post it. And then I know one of them is a little bit later. So now this one, midsummer, would be the one sort of in between. But there is crossover. So that's why any swallowtails that you see or photograph, there's going to be great debate on which one it is. Yeah, at least for now.
We love a lively debate. Marie's asking what lens you use.
So I shoot Canon, and I shoot 300, 100 to 300. For small grass skippers, I use extension tubes, so that I can get closer to them without getting too close to them. So I can be back a little bit, but get closer up to get better detail. I generally do not. I don't know if you're aware, but catching butterflies, you need a permit to catch monarchs. So you cannot catch a monarch or any of the protected species. You cannot catch them. So I generally don't catch any butterflies. Some people catch them and put them into a viewer and wait for them to settle, and then they can take their picture. But I generally just I use a stalking technique where I just stalk the butterfly, wait till it settles and it's comfortable and feeding, and then I approach as slowly as possible and wait till for the opportunity to take the picture. Of course, many times it flies away and then I have to chase it a little bit. So
that's its own skill.
it's taken years to master it. Yeah. And
Okay.
I never hold butterflies. I've seen people holding butterflies. This is another great way to remove some of the scales on its wings, and then you won't have a beautiful butterfly to photograph. So I don't hold butterflies ever. Yeah.
All right. I think we got through them all. Those are some really great questions.
They were challenging, and now they've inspired me to actually find the answers to them, which is just yeah, well, that's great.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. I learned so much, and it's always a pleasure